Have you ever tried playing a sound in your React Native app, only to find out it plays too late, ruining the effect? Or struggle to play multiple sounds at once, working fine on iOS, but not on Android? Maybe you've tried looping a sound, but it wasn't seamless, creating an unwanted pattern. In this video, I'll show you how to play multiple sounds simultaneously with almost no latency, perfect looping, and full control. Let's get started. In order to do all of the nice stuff that I told you about earlier, we're going to utilize a library which I created, and that is called react-native-audio-playback. Now, the reason why this library is very high performance and low latency, and you can have like very fine-grained control over the audio, is because it uses very low-level APIs on both Android and iOS. So on Android, it uses Oboe, and Oboe is a C++ library that makes it to build high-performance audio apps on Android. So that's like kind of the best performance you could get on Android. And the equivalent to that on iOS would be Audio Unit. So in order to kind of give you an explanation of how this library works, I would like to go a bit to Excalibur here. Like the two most important pieces of information are like kind of concepts that you need to understand is the concept of a stream and a player, right? So usually in this library, you would need to set up a stream and open a stream. And from that point forward, you can just load sounds, play sounds, and just manipulate sounds however you want. So yeah, usually you'd have just one stream, you set it up, then you don't have to open it directly. You can open the stream whenever you want to. But the most important thing is you cannot load players unless you set up the stream, right? So first you set up a stream, next you load sounds, which you get a player out of. Next, when you would like to play sounds, you open the stream and you start manipulating the players however you want, play, pause, and everything. And as I mentioned, this library really has very much control over the audio to the point where at every single point, I know like what's being played from the player. So technically when you play, like there's kind of like this pointer which starts going forward, and then when I want to pause, it just stops. And then when I want to seek, I literally tell it where to go. And this fine-grained control is very important when you want to manipulate multiple sounds at the same time, because so in this library, you could play, pause, loop, or seek not only one player, but multiple ones at the same time, right? So we're gonna go through an example where we learn how to use this library. So go into the repo of the library. I'm going to have it in the description. It's basically my GitHub username and then the name React Native Audio Playback. Just press next to this code and then copy the URL by pressing on this icon. Then go somewhere on your device and clone that. So I'll just do git clone. Next, just cd into the directory that was created. By default, it's called React Native Audio Playback. Now, I don't want you to be on the main branch. I want you to switch on a special branch, which I prepared for us for the example, and that would be called tutorial start. So just do git switch tutorial start. And from here, just install the dependencies. So run yarn. So yarn is done. Basically, this is the repository for the library, but inside there's a directory called example, where it's a React Native app, and that's where we're going to work. So cd into that example, basically. And from here, just open it up in whatever editor you want. For me, I like to use NeoVim, so I'll be doing that. Feel free to open VS Code or anything you want. I'll be increasing here the font size in case that's not very clear. And yeah, so let's explore what we have. Basically, the iOS and Android directories we're not going to touch because for the installation, you don't really need it. You just do yarn install, and then for iOS, you do pod install. In this demo, I'm going to show Android, but the API is the same for iOS and Android. So let's go ahead and check out the source. We have this assets directory, which include the assets that we're going to use for the sounds, which we're going to load. Let's go ahead and check out the app. So basically, we only have a safe area view, which has a scroll view and then 3 elements. So let's run the app and just see how the UI looks in the beginning. So I'm going to open up another terminal here, increase a bit the font, and then do yarn start. And then in another one, I'm going to run yarn Android. Okay, so as you can see, the app was successfully built. And that's what the UI looks like. So let's match that with what we have here in the code. So we have a stream control component, and basically that's this thing. And that's what will allow us to control the stream, set up the stream, open it, pause it, close, and load. I mean, open is basically when you want to start to produce sound or like audio. Pause is can be useful. Like for example, I found it useful in a project I was working on, and that's when I went to the background. I want to just pause everything, so I can use this to pause the stream, and then I can open the stream again once I come back to the foreground. And then you close the stream when you no longer want to use the library at all, because once you close the stream, you need to set it up again, and then we're going to have a button to load the sounds which we want to play. So then here we have a player control. We're going to have a player control for every player that's going to be loaded. At the moment, we have no players, so you see almost nothing. It's kind of going to be between these two. And then next, we have the multiplayers control. So as I mentioned previously, so the nice thing about this library is you can really manipulate multiple sounds or like, audio files at the same time. So you can play, pause, loop, and everything directly simultaneously for two or more players. So let's go ahead and check out the stream control, right? So basically, we have this empty boilerplate with those buttons, right? And this section which wraps them. It's just some styling to kind of have them to have a title here and then just lay them in a row. Now, in order to be able to manipulate the stream, we need to fill in these functions. And really, the main API that you want to work with React Native Audio Playback is something called an audio manager. An audio manager um, is a singleton class, right? So you would be import audio manager. So it would be audio manager. And then from there, you have a property called shared. And from here, you start invoking methods. And that's kind of the entry point to the library. So in order to set up the stream, you would just call setupAudioStream. Now, setupAudioStream accepts two parameters, which I won't get into now. I will get to at the end of the video, so make sure you stick until the end because it's a bit complicated and I do not want to complicate things now. And the defaults that are there are really what you want most of the time. That's why I'm just not passing them here. And in order to open the audio stream, it's pretty straightforward. You just call audio manager shared open audio stream and then pause audio stream. It's like that. And then close audio stream is close audio stream. It's pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, we filled in the boilerplate here. So let's close this one. Next, I would like to fill in the use players hook. So as you can see here, we have a hook which returns three things. One is the on player pressed. Now we're going to use this one in the multiplayers control because there we would like to be able to select which players we would like to be able to manipulate simultaneously, right? So we'd have a button for every loaded player. And when we click on it, we toggle between having it selected or not. So this will be used here. Don't be if you don't get it very much, you will understand once we work with it. Next, we have a load players, which will be a function which we will use here, right? When we click on this one, it will load all of the players so we can start using them. And then the player objects is just an array of players, which we would be looping over and creating a player control for so we can control our loaded players. So let's go ahead and check out this use players. As you can see, we have here a state, which will contain the player objects. We have this load players, which is an empty function, which we're going to fill now. And we have the on player pressed, which we're also going to fill. So let's start with load players. So how would you load player with React Native Audio Playback? It's pretty simple, guys. Like you just use the audio manager as said. This is all kind of always the entry point. And then you call shared, you get the shared, the singleton, right? And from there, you just call load sound. And you only need to pass one thing here, and that is just the, right? Like here, you just require the asset. And then you just do assets and for example, game track, right? So this assets is what I already showed you here. This is the directory. So I just do require, get whatever asset you have in your project and just works. and it's an asynchronous function, so it takes some time to load this thing. So you would just do const player1 equals player1 equals await. So this is an async function, so we can do await. One important thing to know here is that the function load sound returns a player or null, right? Now, the reason why it returns null is because whatever source that you pass in here, it may fail because, for example, you could have a typo and like then pass in an asset which doesn't really exist, and then doesn't make sense to have a player for it, right? So yes, we have this player. Let's load in the 3 other sounds. So I'm just going to paste this 3 times, and then player 2, player 3, player 4. Let's change the names. So that would be laser shot. The other one would be music beat. And the third one would be the clap, right? Oh, clap, right? All right, so next, I would like to create an array of player objects from these 4 players. Now, player object, if we take a look at the top, it basically has 3 properties. One is the player, which we get out of the load sound method, and another one is a title, which we would be having to like next for every audio control, there would be a title, just like a nice way to identify which player we are now working with. And this selected property will be used in the multiplayers control. So to control which players we would like to manipulate simultaneously. So let's set player objects from these 4 loaded players. So I'm going to create const player objects equals to, and I'm gonna let AI do the thing here for me. So basically player 1, game track, selected false, player 2, laser shot, select false, and then music beat. And so initially they're all selected false. Now, because here player is player or null, we need to filter out the null ones or like the non-truthy ones. So I'll just do P and then return P dot player. And then I'll just say array of the player objects. And from here, I'm going to set this in the player objects. Next, let's do the on player pressed. So in the multiplayers control, you're going to see this next. We will have these multiple players and then we can press on them. I would basically want to toggle this selected property from true to false or false to true, basically just toggle this. So what we do here is set player object, and we then do prev, and then we do return prev dot map, and then here it's a player object, and then and then we return, we check if the current player object's player equals to the past player. Oh no, not this one, player. If it is, then we need to destructure the object, toggle the selected property. Otherwise, we return p object as it is, right? Because when a player is pressed, we get the player. So we check if it's the same as the one that we're currently looping over. So with that, use player is done. Let's just close here. And I believe now we can just reload the app and take a look. So reload. As I said, the first thing that you need to do is set up the stream. From here, you can really do things. There's no specific order. You can open the stream or load the sound, or load the sound and up the stream. So let's load the sounds. And as you can see here, we have all 4 sounds loaded. And you can now understand what I was talking about, where we have all 4 players and you can switch and toggle between the different states. So the idea here is that, for example, if I set these 2 to be checked and I press play, both of these will be played at the same time, or any of these controls basically. So now that we have these, basically, even if I open the stream and so it says audio stream was good to start, but it was already started, so I probably opened the stream already. So even if I press play or pause or whatever, it won't work because the player controls is empty and we need to do this together. So let's go ahead and do, so yeah, basically we have these buttons, as you can see, play, pause, seek to start, loop, unloop, and the slider, which are these ones. but the methods are empty. So we will be doing these together. So the player control takes in a player and a title. The title is just being used for this section, really here, just for like UI purposes. And the player is the player that was returned by the load sound method, right? So in order to like do these methods, it's really, really simple, guys. You just call player.playSound, and then the other ones, hopefully the AI will help me. Yes. And seek to start is not really seek to start because it's not that's not versatile. You just have seek to, and you pass it the number of milliseconds that you want to seek to. So if you want to seek the first second, you just you pass in 1000. Since I want to seek to start, I pass in 0, right? It's just the number of milliseconds you want to seek to. And then for loop, you say player dot loop sound, yes. But for loop sound, you need to pass in one property, and that's whether you want to loop it or unloop it. So for example, here we pass true. In unloop, we pass false. Like I didn't want to have a loop sound and unloop sound. Yeah, I just wanted to have one method and pass it true or false, basically. And then for the on volume change, it's also pretty simple. You just do player.setVolume, and that is value. And just like that, now we can start playing the audios. So let's restart here. So let's set up stream, load the sound, and then open the stream, right? So from here, I can play, for example, this game track, just one note. I've noticed that when I play the sounds here, like with this recording, the sound doesn't really sound very good. So this has nothing to do with the library. It's probably just the recording. So just make sure that you are coding along or trying by yourself because it works flawlessly, right? So let's play this game track. Right, so then you can pause it and then you can, for example, seek it to start and change the volume. So let's try that. Right, exactly. I hope you guys are hearing this. And then, for example, we can do the music beat. Right, so let's say now we want to loop it. I mean, usually in games and stuff like that, you have the sound which never ends. And that's definitely not a never ending sound. That's really usually like a 10-second or even less sound which loops. And it seems like it's never ending. So for example, let's loop this one. You just press on the loop and then play. Right, and then you pause it and then you can just play it again. So let's try to play multiple sounds simultaneously here. So I'm going to play the beat and then play the clap. Hopefully you hear the clap. If you don't hear it, then it's really just because of the recording and nothing to do with the library. You can try it by yourself. Yeah, so I hope you heard that. But yeah, you can play multiple sounds simultaneously. And the really nice thing is the fact that when you play, like when you press or like invoke the method, it plays instantaneously. And you don't really get this with any other library, especially on Android. This latency thing is a very big problem on Android with any other like React Native library. So we can play this laser shot also. Right, so let's say we want to loop. The loop is seamless and perfect. You don't like notice any patterns. Let's do that. Right, so if you want to like play a sound and make sure that it plays until the end of the like if you want to like play a sound and not pause it like immediately, you want it to like be stopped until the end of the current played thing. So for example, let's say I loop the laser shot, play it, and you don't want to pause it like midway. You want to be like, okay, stop the looping and stop at the last frame of the current played thing. I would suggest you to use unloop, right? Because then it would stop looping it, but still play it until the end of the current loop, you know? So for example, you would just do loop, play, and then instead of pause, you would do unloop, right? So, and that way you just make sure you don't like pause in the middle and it may sound like harsh. I prefer to do it this way. So now that we've done that, let's see how we can manipulate multiple sounds at the same time. And for that, we use the multiplayers control. So let's check out this component, and it really looks very similar to the individual players. So we have the slider and the buttons, but also we have this array of buttons, which represent these ones, which are the different players that are loaded, which are being passed here as the player object. Now, in order to play, pause, seek to start, whatever, the selected ones, not everything, not all of the past player objects, we need to filter for the selected ones. So let's say const selected players equals player objects of filter, p is selected. Exactly. So that's what we want. Now, in order to do the same thing to multiple sounds simultaneously, for example, you could call, like, for example, play on every player, right? But I would not recommend this because maybe this would cause a delay where not like two sounds do not play exactly at the same time because you're invoking them after each other. So instead, what you would need to use is methods that are on the audio manager, right? So for example, if you want to play multiple audios, so you would do audio manager.shared and then play sounds. And there's like this thing for every other method. And the way that these multi-sound manipulation work is it takes an array, right? And then it takes a tuple of a player. So for example, player and the value. For example, play sound here is more about playing and pausing. So if you want to play the sound, you would pass in true. And if you want to do the same thing for another player, for example, player 2, let's say, you would also pass true. But what's really nice is that you don't have to play all sounds together. You could play some and pause some, right? So let's say I want to play player and player 2, but I want to pause player 3. So I could do player 3 and then false. So what this would do is it would play player and player 2, but pause player 3 simultaneously, right? So this is really important when you're like building a game or something similar like a musical app or, you know, an musical instrument app, something like this. Now in our case, we're going to play all of the selected sounds. So for that, what we need to do is we do selected players and then map, and then we do p, and then p dot player true, and we pass in as const. Now, if you are wondering why is it as const, is because if you don't pass as const, TypeScript would think that we are, TypeScript would think that this is an array of player and boolean. So like you can have as many values as you want, but it's really just a tuple of two. And the first one is always a player and the second one is always a boolean. That's why you need to tell it it's a const, because that's what this method accepts, right? It accepts an array of two elements, the first one being a player and the second one being a boolean. So that's how you play multiple sounds. Now, if you want to pause multiple sounds, you would do the same thing, but instead of true, you would pass in false, right? And then for seek to start, you would do seek sounds too, and this accepts then a number. Now again, you don't have to seek all of them to start. This is the nice thing, is that you can seek different audios into different points in time, right? But for this example, we're seeking all of them to the start. Then we can also loop multiple audios. So let's do loop. So basically every single thing that you can do for a single player, you can do it for multiplayers at the same time. You know, I tried to keep the API kind of similar here. So whatever you can do there, you can do here, right? So let's also do the unlooping. So instead of true, just pass in false. And the really nice thing about like this API, actually, I would say, is the volume, right? Because let's do set sounds volume, and then this would be value, right? So because maybe you are in a game and let's say you have like sound effects, right? So let's say you have 5 sound effects, and then you have in the settings screen, for example, adjusting the volume of all sound effects, right? So you don't want to like change one by one. So this would be like a great use case for something like this. Or let's say you want to pause all sound effects, then that's a very nice use case for this play sounds and passing false to multiple ones instead of like calling one by one, you know? So yeah, this is kind of done also. So pretty simple. Let's go ahead and reload the app. So again, we set up the stream, we load the sounds, and then we open the stream. So here, now, for whichever audio sounds that we would like to invoke a method, we'd have to like just select it. So let's say we would like to loop and loop these both of these. So I loop them and then I play them. Now let's say I would like to change the volume of both of these together. Right? And you can do really like seeking to start, pausing, looping, and unlooping in exactly the same way. And this also works exactly on iOS. So you can try it, build it on iOS, works exactly the same way. Let me explain to you the parameters that you could pass to setupAudioStream. And setupAudioStream accepts two parameters, the first being the sampling rate and the second being the channel count. When you set up the audio stream, you need to tell it what sampling rate and channel count the audio files are going to be. Now, one important thing to understand that every audio file has a specific sampling rate and a channel count. So different audio channels could have different values. So if you try to just play whatever audio files like directly as they are, it may not work, right? So what I will try to explain to you here, what they are and how you can convert any audio file, right? So you can convert any audio file to be of the same sampling rate and channel count. So what I'm trying to say here is that you will be able to play any sound you want, but just you need a bit of setup, right? So let's take a look at the sampling rate. So the sampling rate is basically the number of samples per second, right? So usually when there's a sound, right, it's a continuous stream of data, right? But the computers don't really understand this. They want concrete and discrete values, right? So you need to feed them the data like one by one. And that is, you need to take samples of the audio. So usually the common values are 44,100. So that means for every second, there are 44,100 pieces of data for this sound, right? And another value is 48,100. There are other values, but these are the two common ones. The default value that the setupAudioStream takes, or like is by default, is 44,100. Again, I'm going to show as an example how you can get different audio files and then convert them to be of the same values. Then the second one is the channel count. So basically the channel count is how many sources or how many number of sources or channels that this audio file supports or like has data for, right? So like previously, like way back in time, there used to be where like audio devices only had kind of one speaker or like one source of place that audio comes out of. And for that reason, it had only one channel count, right? But these days, usually we have stereos where like on your phone, you would have two different speakers, right and left, or you would have earphones, so right and left. So these are the channel counts, right? So you have two different audio sources. So I'm not sure if you have ever heard this, but sometimes some audios that you hear, you would get some sound on the right, but that you wouldn't get on the left, or vice versa, right? So that's because you could feed different, or like you could provide different audio data to the different audio channels. So again, the default here is 2 in this call, where if you don't pass anything, then it is 2. However, you can make it 1, but my recommendation is to pass it as 2, because let's say you're using, you have 5 different audio files in your app. Chances are you are going to have a mix of 1 and 2, and it's always better to convert from 1 into 2, because then when you convert from 1 to 2, you are basically just duplicating all of the audio data from the first channel into another channel. So you would not be losing any data. But if you were to convert a 2-channel or stereo into 1, that means you would be losing either the right or the left, or like the first or the second, right, data, and just having the other, right? So you would be losing data. So my recommendation is always to go with 2. However, with the sampling rate, my recommendation is always to go with 44,100, because humans basically kind of can't tell the difference if you increase the sampling rate above 44,100. So you can increase, the reason why some audio files have higher values is because they may want to later manipulate these audios. For example, let's say slow the audio down, and then if you start slowing the audio down and you already have 44,100, then you would be playing like less samples, and then the audio might start to like not feel rich and not feel good or sound good, right? But if you're not, like for example, in our apps, we don't really do that. We just play sounds. We're not doing any slow-mo kind of stuff. So for us, you could always convert 44,100, because if you have more samples, like 48,000, you can definitely just take out samples, right? And have the 44,100, and you would not have any problem. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So for this, as an example, let's go into this website. It's called Free Sound. It's a really nice website. I recommend you to like use it if you would like to get some sounds for your app. So from here, let me show you how you could just get any sound file and convert it into the 44,100 sampling rate and a stereo channel count. So let's say, for example, let's search for knock, right? Like a sound called knock. And the nice thing about this website is that you can also pick the channel count and the sampling rate. So just for the sake of example, as I said, we always want to aim for 44,100 and a channel count of 2. So for that, let's pick a 48,000, so I can show you how to convert it, and a sampling rate and the channel count of 1, right? So now all of the sounds here are of sampling rate 48,000 and channel count of 1, so we can convert and show you how. So let's, for example, hear this one, right? So we can check this out. Let's go into it, and you can see it here down. It says 48,000 and channels mono, which stands for 1. Let's download this sound, and yeah. So let me show you how to convert it. The way that you would convert the sounds is using a tool called FFmpeg. The way you would install this on macOS is you would use brew install FFmpeg. You can check out how you do it on Windows and Linux. I'm sure you can find that on the internet. So let's first, let's say you, for example, downloaded an audio from another website which didn't tell you the sampling rate and the audio, the channel count, and you would like to know first what their values are, if you need to convert them or not. For that, you would do ffprop, and fprop is part of ffmpeg. So when you install ffmpeg, it's already there. And then you would pass in the name of the file. So let me check the name of the file that was downloaded, and that was 1449 something, 1440. Okay. And for when you're on this, you would see that the value is 4801, right? Which is expected. We already knew that, but you can use this if you download something from another place, or yeah. So let's say I would like to convert this one to the recommended values that I told you about. For that, you would do ffmpeg, and you pass in an I for input, and then the name of the file, which is this one, and then you pass in AR, which stands for audio rate, and you would pass in 44,100, and then AC, which stands for audio channel, and you would pass in 2, and then the name of the file. So let's say knock.wav, and then you can run that. And let's do ffprop on this new one, and you can see it's 44,100 and 2 channels, right? And if we take a look here at the audio, let's play the first one, right? That's how it sounds. And then the second one, which is converted, it should not sound any different, right? Exactly. So yeah, that's how you do it. Pretty simple. After you convert all of your audio sounds into being the same sampling rate and channel count, now you're free to use them in the app. So this was really important to understand, because you may run into bugs which you're like, why is the sound not playing? Why is it not loading? It's just simple. You need to make sure that whatever you set up the audio stream with, the audio sounds has to be of the same sampling rate and channel counts. With that, we reached the end of the video. I hope you learned something new and maybe use this library in your next app or game. If you enjoyed this video and want me to keep doing videos like that, maybe covering different topics related to React Native, then give this a thumbs up just so I understand that it's helping some people, and maybe also give me some feedback in the comments. If you have any questions, then also make sure to leave that in the comment. Other than that, see you next time.